I thought I got away with it. 10 minutes in a restaurant bathroom. That's all it was. No words, no names. Just a moment I never planned. I went back to the table like nothing happened, smiled, ate my pasta, asked about his sister, and he smiled too. But that night, when he poured me wine and kissed my forehead, I didn't know he already knew. I didn't know he had followed me. I didn't know he had paid the man I cheated with to record everything in case I came back. This is the part no one tells you about betrayal. Not what happens in the moment, but what happens when the silence finally speaks. My name is Erin. I'm 32 and I live in Portland. I work in product design, mostly remote, which sounds more exciting than it is. You sit, you stare, you click, you present, you nod, you deliver. You build things no one really needs, but people pay for them anyway. Most days I'm fine, functional, smiling in the right moments, asking about people's weekends, adding little emojis at the end of emails so I don't sound cold. You know, all the things that pass for warmth. I met Daniel when I was 28. He was the kind of guy who opens doors, brings you tea without asking what kind, remembers birthdays of people you barely talk to. He's 34 now. An engineer, methodical, loyal, the kind of man who gets up early to fold laundry before work because he doesn't like piles. We moved in together after a year. No drama, no mess. It felt like slipping into something soft, like fleece, or a routine. He kisses me on the forehead before leaving the room, texts back within 2 minutes. Every single time. He's the kind of man you're supposed to marry. And maybe I would have. Maybe I still will, in another life. One where I never stood up from that table. One where I didn't disappear for 10 minutes and come back someone else. But that's not what happened. If you're ready, I'll continue with part 2. The man at the bar didn't even smile, where the tension quietly begins. We were out on a Thursday, one of those midweek dinners meant to feel spontaneous but actually penciled in a week ago. He picked a little Italian place on Alberta Street, cozy, overpriced, dimly lit, the kind with paper menus and fairy lights that make everything look warmer than it is. He said we should come back in the fall when the leaves go red. I smiled, said that sounded lovely. Inside, I felt nothing. Dinner started like all our dinners. He talked about a supplier issue at work, something about invoices and delays. I nodded where I was supposed to, said that sucks once or twice. But my attention wasn't with him. It had drifted to the bar, to a man sitting alone in a dark shirt with rolled-up sleeves and a half-full glass in front of him. He wasn't staring. He wasn't even smiling. Just aware. His eyes moved enough to let me know he'd seen me, and somehow that small flicker settled under my skin like static. I told myself I was being ridiculous, but it's funny how fast something meaningless can take up space. He kept talking. I kept nodding. The man at the bar never looked again. He didn't need to. The damage was already done. I stood up, told Daniel I was going to the restroom. He didn't stop mid-sentence, didn't glance up, just smiled and kept going, like nothing about this night would change anything. I walked past the kitchen doors, past the hallway that smelled like old mop water and lavender soap. When I reached the bathroom, I didn't expect to see him there. But I did, and I didn't turn around. We didn't speak. There was no flirtation, no build-up, just motion, impulse. The kind of silence that swells between strangers who won't ever know each other's middle names. It didn't last long, not really, but it was long enough to split something open in me. Afterward, I fixed my hair, reapplied lip gloss, and stared at myself in the mirror like I was rehearsing a lie I hadn't quite committed to. I came back to the table. Daniel was thanking the waiter as the food arrived. He asked if I was okay. I smiled, said there'd been a line. He poured my water and asked if I wanted to try his lasagna. I said no. Asked about his sister instead. He said she was thinking about moving to Denver. I don't remember what I ate. I just remember the man at the bar was gone, and I never saw him leave. We got home around 9. He poured us both a glass of wine, even though I'd said earlier I wasn't drinking. I took it anyway. Sat next to him on the couch with my legs tucked under me like I always did. Pretended to be tired. Pretended I wasn't hearing the echo of a moment that hadn't even included words. He picked a movie we'd both seen 100 times, something safe, familiar. He fell asleep halfway through. I didn't. I watched the credits roll across his closed eyes and thought, he has no idea. And then, even worse, maybe he never will. The next morning he made pancakes, called it a small Saturday, the name he gave any morning we both had off. He kissed my temple, handed me coffee with the perfect amount of oat milk, told me he had a surprise planned, a day trip to the coast. I said he was the sweetest man alive. And the worst part? I meant it. I loved him. Still do. But love doesn't always stop you from hurting someone. Sometimes it just makes you quieter while you do it. We drove for over an hour, talking about the same things we always talked about, whether we should get another dog, if we could manage both families for Christmas, where we might live next year if rent keeps climbing. I answered like nothing inside me had snapped, like I wasn't already sitting in the ruins of a version of myself I couldn't get back to. He didn't notice. Not then. Maybe not even now. Because in his mind, I had gone to the bathroom for 10 minutes. That's all. But I hadn't come back the same. I knew that. I felt it in the way silence started following me around like a second shadow. I kept waiting for guilt to hit, some violent wave. But all I got was a dull hum, like my conscience was stuck between radio stations. And while he moved through the apartment with his usual softness, folding laundry, singing in the shower, stirring pasta sauce with a spoon like it was a microphone, I started to feel like a guest in a house I used to live in. Every time he touched me, even gently, something in me twitched. Not revulsion, not rejection, just memory. I couldn't forget what I'd done, and my body wouldn't let me. That's when I realized the worst part wasn't lying to him. It was how easily I'd learned to keep doing it. That Friday, we had dinner with his friends. Takeout, cheap wine, a board game I secretly hated but always pretended to enjoy. I wore the sweater he liked, tied my hair the way he once said made me look soft. We sat cross-legged on the floor, passing soy sauce packets and inside jokes. I laughed when I was supposed to, joked when prompted, but in the background of my mind, I kept seeing a dim hallway, a crooked mirror, a man whose name I never learned. I wasn't haunted, just split. Like part of me never came back from that bathroom. He rested his hand on my leg, mid-laugh, so casually, so lovingly. I remember thinking, you really don't see me anymore. Not because he stopped loving me, but because the version of me he loved was gone, and he hadn't noticed. That night in bed, I knew he wanted to be close. I'd seen it building all evening, the way he lingered behind me in the kitchen, the softness in his eyes. When he finally reached for me, I didn't stop him, but I didn't meet him there either. I moved like I was supposed to, said the right words, mirrored the rhythm. But I wasn't with him. I was somewhere else entirely. Not with anyone. Just disconnected. Watching the ceiling. Counting the seconds. After, I went to the bathroom. Sat on the edge of the tub in the dark. 10 minutes. Just breathing. Just existing. Then I came back to bed, and he was already asleep. Or pretending to be. I lay beside him and stared at the red glow of the alarm clock. For a moment, I thought about telling him everything, blurting it out into the dark like a confession with no priest. But I didn't. Because I knew it wouldn't just hurt him. It would undo him. And I wasn't ready to watch him break. So I buried it deeper. I started staying out later. Said yes to more after-work plans. Claimed I needed gym time, quiet time, headspace. He believed me. Or maybe he wanted to. He said I looked happier. Said I had a glow. I nearly laughed out loud. He thought I was healing. In truth, I was disappearing. I wasn't reclaiming myself. I was erasing the parts I didn't know how to live with. One morning, standing in front of the mirror, I whispered it to myself. You cheated. Just 2 words, barely above a breath. I said it again, louder. It still didn't feel real. I knew what I had done, but I didn't feel like the kind of person who does that. Not completely. A part of me still believed this wasn't me, that I could walk it back if I just stayed quiet long enough. But I couldn't. Because the truth wasn't that I made a mistake. The truth was, I wanted to disappear for a moment. And I did. He started noticing in ways that weren't direct. He'd ask if I was sleeping okay, if something at work had me stressed, if I'd felt all right that night at dinner, the night I disappeared. He said it gently, not accusing, just aware. I said I'd had a headache, said the bathroom line was long. He nodded, didn't push. But something in his eyes lingered just a second too long. That's when I started watching him. The way he looked at me had changed. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for me to feel it. He wasn't interrogating, but he was observing. I could feel it every time I turned away. At night, I started sleeping in a t-shirt again. Said I was cold. I wasn't. I just couldn't bear the feeling of his skin against mine. Not because I didn't love him, but because I couldn't unremember what I'd done. Couldn't scrub the past out of my bones. Even when I smiled, even when I kissed him back, my body still knew. I became quiet without realizing. Answered questions with half sentences, laughed too hard at nothing, or not at all when I should have. I stayed late at work, ran errands I used to avoid, claimed I needed space. He never argued. He said he understood. But every time he smiled at me, something behind that smile looked tired, like he was waiting for someone to return. One night we were watching a movie. Something slow, comforting. He reached for my knee like he always did, just to feel connected. I didn't flinch, but I shifted. Barely. Just enough. He noticed. His hand paused in the air, then slowly went back to his lap. He didn't try again. I lay awake later, thinking about that tiny moment, how distance grows in silence, how 1,000 small hesitations add up to one giant absence. The next morning, over coffee, I asked without thinking, "Do you think people can come back from betrayal?" He looked up, surprised, then smiled and said, "Why? Did something happen?" I laughed, said it was something I'd read. He didn't press, but his eyes didn't leave mine for a long time after that. A few days later, I saw him, the man, on the street near the bookstore. I almost walked past, almost told myself I was mistaken, but it was him. He didn't smile, didn't approach, just looked once. Brief, hollow, enough. I could have kept walking, should have, but I didn't. I turned around. We didn't say much, walked a little, ended up at his place. I didn't explain. He didn't ask. I told myself it was different this time, that it didn't count, that I was in control. But it was worse. Not because of what happened, but because of how little it meant. I left without saying goodbye, came home, showered, made dinner, kissed Daniel like nothing happened. He asked about my day. I said it was fine. 2 days later, I got a message. No name, no photo, just a link. I clicked it. And there it was, video. Me. Him. Clear. No room for interpretation. I stopped breathing. Another message came right after. He knows. He came home that evening like nothing was wrong. Takeout in one hand, phone in the other, humming something off-key. He kissed my forehead, unpacked dinner, asked me to grab wine. I did. My hands were shaking, but not enough for him to notice, or maybe he already had. We sat at the table like always, 2 plates, 2 glasses, the shape of a normal life. Then between bites, I asked quietly, "Is there anything you want to talk about?" He didn't look up right away, just kept chewing. Then after a beat, he said, "You thought I didn't know." My stomach dropped. He still didn't raise his voice. Just looked at me and said, "I followed you that night. I saw you. I didn't say anything. I just waited." I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. He continued, "I hoped it was just that once. But when it happened again, I reached out to him, paid him, told him that if you ever came back, he shouldn't stop you. Just record it." I stared at him like I didn't know him, but the truth was he hadn't changed. I had. He said, "I didn't want revenge. I just wanted to know who I was really with. Now I do." I asked, "So what happens now?" He stood up, took his keys, said he'd stay at his brother's for a few days. Before leaving, he paused in the doorway. "You're not a bad person," he said. "But you're not the person I thought you were, and I can't unsee that." And then he left. No yelling, no slammed doors, no shattered plates, just quiet, final, clean. I sat there with untouched food, a full glass of wine, and a video still open on my phone. And in that silence, everything finally made sense.